Happening now, breaking news, going it alone. President Trump announces that starting today, he's pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, in which nearly 200 nations have pledged to fight global warming. The president says he's open to negotiating a new deal that he says would be fair to Americans. Growing opposition. There were objections to the president's move from within the White House, the cabinet, and the president's own family. Major corporations and dozens of U.S. mayors have already signaled their dismay. What will the real impact of the president's decision be? Investigating Sessions. Lawmakers confirmed CNN's reporting that they're investigating whether the Attorney General Jeff Sessions had another secret meeting with the Russian ambassador, and they revealed they've asked the FBI to look into possible perjury. Putin's denial. U.S. intelligence has already said the election meddling trail leads directly to the Kremlin. But Russian President Vladimir Putin says his government isn't to blame for the cyber attacks. Now he says patriotic Russian hackers may be responsible. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news and a stunning move that puts the United States in opposition to the rest of the world. President Trump has announced he's pulling the U.S. out of a nearly 200-nation Paris Climate Accord aimed at limiting global warming. The move fulfills a campaign pledge and will find favor among President Trump's base, especially in coal mining states and other hard-hit areas of the economy. But it comes over the opposition of some cabinet members and senior White House officials, and even his daughter Ivanka, who urged the president to change U.S. commitments to the agreement without withdrawing from the agreement. Also breaking right now, fired FBI Director James Comey is now set to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee 1 week from today. He's expected to address his private encounters with President Trump, who reportedly urged him to end his investigation into Michael Flynn's Russia ties. That comes as Senate Democrats reveal they asked the FBI to investigate ties between Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Russia and possible perjury during his confirmation process. And Russia's President Vladimir Putin is shrugging off, but not flatly denying charges that the Kremlin sponsored cyber attacks on America's election campaign. Putin claims there may have been patriotic private Russian hackers who acted independently on behalf of Russia. I'll talk to Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speer and Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin and our correspondents, specialists and guests. They're all standing by with full coverage of the day's top stories. Let's begin with President Trump's blockbuster announcement that he's pulling the United States out of the nearly 200-nation Paris Climate Agreement. Let's go straight to our White House correspondent, Sarah Murray. Sarah, break it all down for us.
Well, Wolf, in many ways, we saw President Trump go back to basics today. He hit the sort of nationalist theme, the America First theme that he campaigned on as he made this monumental announcement that the U.S. would no longer be a part of the Paris Climate Agreement.
The bottom line is that the Paris Accord is very unfair at the highest level to the United States.
Today, President Trump is putting a check mark next to one of his key campaign promises.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord Thank you. Thank you. But begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction.
Trump announcing the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement in the face of protests from business groups, world leaders, and even Trump's own daughter, Ivanka. While critics have said backing out of the deal will put the U.S. at a disadvantage on the world stage, Trump insisted the Paris Agreement was bad for business and bad for the U.S. economy.
Major economic wound. We would find it very hard to compete with other countries.
In the past, Trump has proclaimed climate change is a hoax, but he shifted his rhetoric on Thursday.
as someone who cares deeply about the environment, which I do.
Insisting his decision was driven by economic factors rather than his view of global warming.
This agreement is less about the climate and more about other countries gaining a financial advantage over the United States.
But Trump also left the door open to renegotiating the agreement or striking an entirely new climate deal.
We'll sit down with the Democrats and all of the people that represent either the Paris Accord or something that we can do that's much better than the Paris Accord.
The move to withdraw distances the United States from nearly every nation on the globe. Just two countries, Syria and Nicaragua, refused to sign on to the 2015 global agreement to curb climate change. But it also scratches off another campaign trail promise, one that's sure to be cheered by Trump's conservative base.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
Former President Obama, whose administration negotiated the climate deal, quickly denounced Trump's decision, warning it could diminish America's standing on the world stage. In a statement, Obama said, "Even in the absence of American leadership, even as this administration joins a small handful of nations that reject the future, I'm confident that our states, cities, and businesses will step up and do even more to lead the way and help protect for future generations the one planet we've got." Now, the president may have said he cares about the environment, but his associates still are not saying whether he believes in climate change and if humans contributed to it. A number of senior administration officials just held a briefing here at the White House, and they refused to answer those questions. Back to you, Wolf.
All right, Sarah Murray over at the White House, thanks very much. Let's dig a little bit deeper right now. CNN's Fareed Zakaria is joining us. Pleas from around the world and within his own inner circle to uphold the deal. Tonight, the president is keeping a campaign promise, but at what price? I'll speak live to the president's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn. Secret meeting? New questions about Attorney General Jeff Sessions, his Kremlin contacts, and whether he might have committed perjury. Senators confirming CNN's reporting about a possible third undisclosed meeting with the Russian ambassador. Day of reckoning. The date is set for fired FBI Director James Comey to go public about his private conversations with President Trump. But will his Senate testimony be a game changer? And acting alone, the House Intelligence Committee chairman under fire for unilaterally issuing subpoenas related to the Russia probe. Tonight, a top Democrat is accusing Devin Nunes of violating his pledge to step aside from the investigation. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news tonight, a major decision by President Trump that may have huge global consequences. He just officially announced that the United States is withdrawing from the landmark Paris Climate Agreement aimed at combating global warming. The president says he's willing to negotiate a new deal that's more fair to Americans, but the backlash is already unfolding this hour. Also breaking, James Comey's bombshell testimony about his confrontations with the president. That will happen 1 week from today. The Senate Intelligence Committee setting a date for the fired FBI director to speak publicly. Comey is expected to confirm that President Trump urged him to end his investigation of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Also tonight, renewed focus on Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Russia contacts. CNN reporting that congressional investigators are examining whether Sessions had a third undisclosed meeting with the Russian ambassador during the campaign. Two Senate Democrats now revealing that they asked the FBI to look into that matter and the possibility that Sessions committed perjury. And Vladimir Putin, he's hinting that some Russians may indeed have been responsible for U.S. election meddling. The Kremlin leader still flatly denies any government role, but he now suggests, quote, patriotically minded private Russian hackers may be to blame. I'll speak about all of that and much more with our guests, including Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's a Democrat on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. And our correspondents and specialists are also standing by. First, Let's go to our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, with more on the president's decision today to withdraw from the climate deal. Jim, a lot at stake for the president, a lot at stake potentially for the planet.
For all of us, Wolf, in a speech that reflected the political climate in Washington more than the warming of the planet, the president did pull the U.S. out of the Paris Accord. That puts the U.S. along with Nicaragua and Syria as the only countries not participating in the climate deal. Late this afternoon, White House officials could not even tell reporters whether the president even believes in climate change. With the Earth hanging in the balance, President Trump stayed true to his political orbit, ending U.S. participation in the Paris Climate Agreement.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord
after a fierce debate inside the White House that pitted his top strategist, nationalist Steve Bannon, who favored pulling out of the deal, against his own daughter, Ivanka, who advocated staying in the agreement. The president said his administration will try to hammer out a new climate deal, something of a consolation prize for Ivanka.
So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine.
The speech was steeped in campaign rhetoric as the president framed his choice as a win for American workers in the heartland.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
And a loss for nations Mr. Trump accused of mocking the U.S.
At what point does America get demeaned? At what point do they start laughing at us as a country? We want fair treatment for its citizens, and we want fair treatment for our taxpayers. We don't want other leaders and other countries laughing at us anymore, and they won't be.
The president's move was instantly cheered by conservatives who feared the president would fail to keep a campaign promise, repeated time and again.
We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement and stop. Unbelievable. And stop all payments of the United States tax dollars to UN global warming programs.
This is the moment we finally determined we would save our planet.
Former President Obama, who helped craft the Paris deal, criticized his successor's decision, saying in a statement, "Even as this administration joins a small handful of nations that reject the future, I'm confident that our states, cities, and businesses will step up and do even more to lead the way and help protect for future generations the one planet we've got." Something the Pittsburgh mayor tweeted he plans to do. The move is also being rejected by leading American CEOs who had pleaded with the president to stay in the deal. Tesla's Elon Musk announced he's stepping down from the president's economic advisory boards, tweeting, "Climate change is real. Leaving Paris is not good for America or the world." But the president's decision should come as no surprise. He's tweeted in the past that global warming is a hoax created by the Chinese to make the U.S. non-competitive. Now it's China, European leaders warn, who may reap the benefits.
We explained to Mr. Trump in Taormina that it would not be good for the world or the United States if America was to literally step off the world stage, because the vacuum will be filled and the Chinese are in prime position to take on a leadership role.
Now, Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, were absent from the Rose Garden ceremony. A White House official says they were observing a Jewish holiday today, but the official also noted that while Ivanka stayed at home, Kushner decided to attend a long-scheduled meeting instead of the president's speech in the Rose Garden. And as for that one line at the start of the speech, when the president referenced a terrorist attack in the Philippines, police in Manila now say it was just a robbery, and a White House official tells us, Wolf, that the president made that remark after being briefed by his national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, so the White House appears to be blaming that on the national security advisor. Wolf?
Interesting indeed. All right, thanks very much, Jim Acosta, for that report. We're going to have a lot more on the president's climate change decision. That's coming up. I'll speak live with the president's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, who reportedly urged him to stay in the Paris Agreement. We'll also be joined later this hour by the mayor of Pittsburgh. He's not happy that the president invoked his city to defend his withdrawal from the Paris accord. But let's get to the Russia investigation right now, as anticipation clearly builds for James Comey to break his silence next Thursday, a week from today, and testify openly about his private conversations with President Trump. CNN's Diane Gallagher is following all the breaking developments for us. Diane, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, they certainly will have many questions for the fired FBI director.
They certainly will, Wolf. I mean, this is, to say the least, highly anticipated testimony that, remember, they weren't sure was going to happen. So while senators are sure to grill Comey on whether the president pressured him to go easy on now former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, also expect them to try and get answers about some other members of the administration as well.
As long as he's given permission by Mr. Mueller to do so, that potentially we could have bombshells that begin to land next week.
And when James Comey testifies next Thursday, he could be asked about Attorney General Jeff Sessions' meeting with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, following CNN's reporting that congressional investigators are examining whether Sessions had an undisclosed private meeting with the Russian ambassador in April of last year at the Mayflower Hotel.
If these allegations prove to be correct, they would be very serious, because after all, he failed to disclose his meetings with the Russian ambassador when he testified. So that is an enormously serious charge.
Today, Democratic Senators Al Franken and Patrick Leahy released 3 letters sent in March, April, and May of this year, in which they asked the FBI to investigate whether Sessions lied to senators about previous meetings between Sessions and Kislyak, writing, quote, "We are concerned about Attorney General Sessions' lack of candor to the committee and his failure thus far to accept responsibility for testimony that could be construed as perjury." The Department of Justice responded, saying the facts haven't changed. The then senator did not have any private or side conversations with any Russian officials at the Mayflower Hotel.
Fundamental trend.
Former campaign policy advisor Carter Page, who the president recently tweeted would blow the Democrats' case away with this testimony, was asked about his meetings with Kislyak on CBS This Morning.
You only met with him one time.
Well, I mean, he was around for several days, right? And I don't like talking about confidential information. Everyone that was in that meeting had agreed that it's off the record and we're not going to disclose that.
But the president tweeted today that the big story is about the unmasking and surveillance of people. And House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes tweeted this.
Thank you, Chairman.
The committee issued 4 bipartisan subpoenas Wednesday, but Nunes, who promised to step aside from the Russia investigation back in April after becoming the subject of a House ethics probe into whether he revealed classified intelligence, well, he issued additional subpoenas targeting documents related to former Obama administration officials in his probe of unmasking.
We do oversight all the time of issues of unmasking and minimization, so I'm not sure why there was a necessity to issue subpoenas to agencies that are already working with us, unless the goal was simply to get publicity or perhaps obscure the subpoenas that were going out in a bipartisan way.
This as the U.S. discusses whether to return these luxury compounds to Russia after they were closed last year by the Obama administration as punishment for Russian interference in the U.S. election. Russian President Vladimir Putin also speaking out today, suggesting he and President Trump aren't friends, after stressing the two have never met.
He is a straightforward, sincere man. You can't really classify him as a traditional politician. He never worked in politics. Therefore, this is a person with a fresh view of things, whether you like it or not. But this always, very often, brings something good.
Now, Putin also echoing what sounded like Trump calling for a normalization of U.S.-Russia relationships. And when it comes to their own personal relationship, the two presidents won't be able to say that they haven't officially met for long. Both will be in Hamburg, Germany for the G20 next month. And Wolf, of course, you can bet the eyes of the world will be on that handshake.
Certainly will be. Diane Gallagher, thanks very much for that report. Let's dig deeper right now on that possible third meeting between Jeff Sessions and the Russian ambassador. Our chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, is part of the team that broke this story for CNN. Jim, some members of Congress seem to be confirming your reporting. What else are you learning tonight?
This is what we understand, that congressional investigators as well as the FBI are looking into whether then Senator Jeff Sessions had an additional private meeting with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. This in April 2016 at a larger event. You're seeing some video there. Actually, no, that's different video, but a larger event at the Mayflower Hotel in April of that year where President Trump gave his first major foreign policy speech. What they're looking into is whether before or after that meeting on the side there was a private meeting between Sessions and the Russian ambassador. They haven't established it with certainty yet, but they're asking for more. Here's that meeting now. This is where Trump gave that speech. So the question is, at the Mayflower Hotel, somewhere else in that building, was there a private meeting? They have asked Sessions for more information, including schedules, as they seek to determine the answer to that question. Of course, it's relevant because earlier in his confirmation hearing, he denied he had any meetings with Russian officials. Then in March, it was reported in the Washington Post that he had 2 of them. He had to correct his testimony, his sworn testimony. So the question now is, was there another meeting that he has not disclosed?
And tell us a little bit more, whatever you can, about what Senators Leahy and Franken were asking the FBI to do.
So this is interesting, Wolf, because after our story went to air last night, Senator Franken was interviewed, and he revealed that he had sent letters to the FBI asking a very similar question. Then today, CNN was the first to obtain those letters. As it turns out, Senators Franken and Leahy, both members of the Judiciary Committee, who, of course, was the body that confirmed Sessions as the Attorney General, they sent letters in March, April, and May to the FBI asking, in effect, the same question. Was there another meeting that Sessions had that he did not reveal? And because he had not revealed previous meetings, whether it was possible that he had perjured himself by doing so. So, again, what we're learning then is that there's another congressional body, in this case the Judiciary Committee, who is not taking Sessions' denial at face value, is asking for more information, and has in fact asked the FBI to investigate it. And as we reported last night, we know that the FBI is looking into this as part of their broader counterintelligence investigation regarding Russian interference in the U.S. election, Wolf.
Very interesting. Jim Sciutto reporting for us. Great reporting. Thanks very much. Let's get back to the breaking news on the president's decision today to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. Joining us now, Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's a Democrat on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Well, let me get your reaction to the president's decision to have the United States pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That's an agreement signed by nearly every other country on Earth, nearly 200 countries. Only 2 others have refused to sign, Syria and Nicaragua. So what message did the president send to the rest of the world with this announcement?
The message to the rest of the world is that the United States is abdicating leadership here. No one who abandons the field can fight and win, and the United States essentially is going to the sidelines in a small team of outliers like Nicaragua and Syria after working for years and years to enlist the rest of the world community. You know, we heard for many, many years that there was nothing the United States could do about global warming or climate change because China and India would not cooperate. Then 195 nations, including China and India, joined this agreement, and now we are becoming the outliers and abandoning it. And we're not only abandoning the agreement, we're abandoning jobs and technology and innovation, and the Chinese are going to fill that gap, and we're going to lose jobs as a result. We know in Connecticut, because we're at the forefront of job creation, technology, and innovation in this area, and it will discourage that kind of innovation and investment, but it will also mean that policies in Washington will change, and we will roll back efforts to make the air cleaner and the environment safer.
Truly a historic decision, critically important decision by the president today. The fallout could be enormous. Let's turn, Senator, to another major story we're following. Congressional investigators are now probing whether the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, had an undisclosed third meeting with Russia's ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak. If it turns out that these meetings took place, do you believe the Attorney General should resign, as Senators Franken and Leahy have suggested?
If he has failed to be truthful, yet again, to the Judiciary Committee or to the public, he must resign. If he were in our shoes, he would not tolerate this kind of dishonesty, assuming it has occurred. He testified falsely. He then corrected the record under oath. So this failure to disclose would be, in effect, a second instance of non-truthfulness, and I believe would require his resignation. And I believe he should come before the Judiciary Committee, not just the FBI to investigate, but actually testify, as should Director Comey and the White House counsel McGahn. But particularly after these questions have been raised, Jeff Sessions should come back, as I have said he should before, but this new news makes it absolutely essential that he come back and clarify the record and explain why he failed to disclose these meetings.
Following his recusal from the Russia investigation in early March, the Attorney General was asked by a reporter if there were any other meetings he failed to disclose. He responded, and I'm quoting him now, "I don't believe so. You know, we meet a lot of people. I don't believe so." Here's the question. Is meeting with a lot of people an adequate defense in this case?
No, it is not, because we're talking here about the Russian ambassador. These Russian conversations and meetings were a focus of intense interest, both publicly and privately, and he had an obligation to be careful and complete about his disclosures. And, you know, Wolf, there is a broader, larger pattern here, which is concealment of conversations with the Russians. Flynn did it on his disclosure and confidential clearance forms. Then, of course, there are now allegations that Kushner did it, and Sessions as well. There is a concealment pattern here, and the question is, what are they hiding?
Senator Blumenthal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, why did the president reject the advice of some of his closest advisors and pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement? I'll ask his chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn. He'll join us live. Stay with us.
Aaron Burnett out front. Stories that
Nicaragua have signed on to this deal. So what signal is the president sending to the rest of the world?
Well, the signal that they're receiving is certainly one of shock. I think the signal that Donald Trump is sending has much more to do with his supporters, has to do with Americans, and specifically those Americans who support him and are very happy that he made this move. But we're hearing this reaction from around the world of leaders, of people who are just stunned. And many of them feel that the U.S. is ceding ground when it comes to being a global leader. So that message that's really being received from them is that the U.S. is moving towards isolationism. And, you know, that's something that is certainly been shocking to them, Wolf.
I want to bring Bianca Golodriga to this conversation. Bianca, the president argues that pulling out will save American jobs. But as you know, many of America's largest companies, including energy companies like ExxonMobil, they supported the Paris Agreement and urged the president not to have the U.S. drop out. Tell us why they think it's good for American jobs to be part of this international agreement.
Yeah, including Rex Tillerson, his Secretary of State, who was noticeably absent from that Rose Garden statement today. He was a supporter when he was the CEO of ExxonMobil. Interestingly enough, shareholders today voted for the first time, 60% of them, that the company should be more forthcoming about the dangers and risks posed to the company and their bottom line from climate change. You had other oil companies as well, BP, Conoco. They all basically feel, Wolf, that they have a better opportunity with them sitting at the table, at the global table, and participating in this conversation of lowering fuel emissions around the world, that ultimately it would benefit their bottom line. The CEO of BP in St. Petersburg, Russia today said, quote, "We have to transition the world to lower carbon forms of energy." And interestingly enough, I thought it was a bit ironic, Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, just now issued his first tweet saying today's decision is a setback for the environment and for the U.S.'s leadership position in the world. Interesting and ironic, obviously, Wolf, given the amount of attention dedicated to Goldman Sachs and the role that some of its former employees play in the current administration. Gary Cohn, he was present today in that ceremony.
You know, I want to show viewers, Bianca, some live pictures coming in from Paris right now. You see the new president, President Emmanuel Macron, saying that France deeply regrets this U.S. decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, saying it's a mistake for U.S. interests. Just saw a tweet from Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, saying we are deeply disappointed the United States federal government has decided to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Phil Mudd, the president is receiving, as you can tell, a lot of blowback, and including a lot of blowback from national security experts. Why are so many in the military and intelligence community so opposed to his decision to withdraw from this accord?
Wolf, in the heat of the moment, we need just a bit of perspective here. Let's go back after World War II. America has been in the leadership role in the fight against communism, in the fight against terrorism. Let's fast forward to the past 120 days. For everybody in this country, myself included, who thinks America should continue to lead with the Europeans and others, number one, we had the President of the United States go to NATO, the post-World War II leadership of Europe, and not offer the kind of commitment to NATO that you would have expected. The Europeans stepped back and said, where is America on their traditional commitment for the past 70 years? The next war that's coming, a confrontation with Russia over cyber issues, including not only intervention in our election, but intervention in the French election. We have zero credibility to lead the Europeans on cyber. The president won't even acknowledge the Russian engagement with the American election. And finally, the long-term battle. How does human involvement with the environment affect things like water, affect things like famine, which will lead to war? In those three areas, we've told the world we will not provide leadership. People like me look back and say, Americans want leadership, but you can't lead from the sidelines, and that's what we're seeing here.
Crystalisa, in the president's speech, and all of us were paying very close attention, he mentioned workers in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. I assume it's not a coincidence that those three states were clearly decisive in his electoral college victory.
Now, there's no coincidence in a speech that was long and pre-written, and Donald Trump read, and this is not always the case with him, read from the teleprompter, Wolf. That was 100% on purpose. He also had the line in there, I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. Many people on Twitter obviously noting that he lost the city of Pittsburgh, though he did win the state of Pennsylvania. It's sort of a little bit of a rhetorical parlance there. What I would say is this is Donald Trump influenced heavily by Steve Bannon, trying everything he can do to make good on the promises he believes he made to the base in his party, that he believes Steve Bannon has a whiteboard wall in his office in the White House in which all the promises Donald Trump made on the campaign trail are written, and there are lots of them, Wolf, and that Steve Bannon believes deep down that the way in which Donald Trump both makes good on the promises he made as a candidate and helps himself get reelected in 2020 is to do what he said he would do. Don't fall into the trap of going Washington. Do what you said you would do. Shake things up. This is quite clearly, Phil Mudd made this point, a retraction from the way in which the U.S. has envisioned its role in the world, particularly as it relates to Europe, in post-World War II times. That is Trumpism. Should not be. Emmanuel Macron said he was surprised. He shouldn't be. Because if he paid attention to the campaign, Donald Trump said he was going to do this and many other things like it that represent a break, not just from the Democratic policies of Barack Obama, but from the Republican policies of George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. We are through the looking glass as it relates to the traditional Republican-Democratic spectrum on these issues.
But very quickly, Brianna, as you know, in contrast to this decision, the president did break a commitment that he made during the campaign, a commitment he made often during the campaign. Today, he signed a waiver saying that he would not move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He had made that promise throughout the campaign. Today, he did what President Obama repeatedly did, what President Bush repeatedly did, what President Clinton repeatedly did, every 6 months signing a waiver not to move the embassy, citing national security interests. How do you explain that?
Well, if he really wants a shot at tackling the issue of Mideast peace, then that was something that was necessary. But as you point out, this goes completely against what he said during the campaign, and also the ambassador that he picked towards Israel, to represent the U.S. and Israel. It does go counter, but it's certainly, I would say, a pragmatic move. The White House did indicate this is something that they can look at again later. But pragmatism is what I would say, Wolf.
Let me bring Bianna Golodryga back into this conversation as well. Very quickly, Bianna, I want to get your quick reaction to the latest developments. The president's Attorney General Jeff Sessions may have had another undisclosed meeting during the campaign with the Russian ambassador to the United States. You see these new investigations going on. Give me your analysis of this.
Well, it's becoming harder and harder to just say that this was yet another coincidence. I mean, he's a seasoned politician. I really am curious now as to how many meetings he had with Russian officials prior to first engaging with the Trump campaign. And secondly, one has to note, he has now stated publicly multiple times that he had never, or he doesn't recollect meeting with Russians. You know, a normal situation, anytime that happens, you go back and you check your own records. Of course he would have had a handler with him. So either the handler didn't know about this meeting or the handler reminded him, and once again he chose not to be forthcoming about it and thus waited until a media report outed the meeting, and thus made it even more peculiar as to what is going on with this campaign and Russian officials in particular.
All right, everybody stand by. There's a lot more going on. We're following all of these developments. And by the way, in our next hour, I'll speak live with Gary Cohn. He's the director of the President's National Economic Council. We'll talk about the impact of the President's decision to pull out of the Paris climate deal. And Vladimir Putin makes a slight but potentially significant change in his story. Stay with us for the Russian leader's latest hints about who may be behind the cyber attacks and the meddling in the U.S. presidential election. We're ahead of the breaking news. President Trump's decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Global Climate Agreement. But we're also following a rather intriguing change in Vladimir Putin's usual flat denial of any Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential election. Let's bring in CNN's Brian Todd. Brian, what's Putin saying now?
Wolf, tonight, for the first time, it seems, Vladimir Putin admits the hacking of the U.S. election process came from Russia. Now, he still denies his government was behind it, instead saying, quote, patriotic Russians could have been involved. Patriotic Russians who cyber investigators say could still be tied to Putin. Vladimir Putin tonight again demonstrates his mastery of deflection and denial when it comes to allegations of Russia's role in meddling in America's election process. Putin likens hackers to artists.
They may act on behalf of their country. They wake up in a good mood and paint things. Same with hackers. They woke up today, read something about the state-to-state relations. If they are patriotic, they contribute in a way they think is right, to fight against those who say bad things about Russia.
Patriots doing it on their own, not backed by the government. What do you think?
The U.S. intelligence community in January concluded with high confidence that Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign to try to shape the U.S. election. And part of that influence campaign were hackers. This is Putin trying to obfuscate and blur what is the reality.
U.S. intelligence says the Russian military intelligence agency, the GRU, used online personas known as Guccifer 2.0 and DCLeaks.com to release hacked material to influence the American election. U.S. officials say Putin's fingerprints may not be on the computer keys, but the operation had to have been approved by the top levels of the Russian government. Today, Putin said Russia could have been framed.
I can imagine that someone is doing this purposefully, building the chain of attacks so that the territory of the Russian Federation appears to be the source of that attack. Modern technologies allow that kind of thing.
Perhaps he sees the trail of evidence is getting closer to the Kremlin.
The cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which investigated the Democratic Party hacks, says they're the work of hacking teams known as Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, tied to Russian government and intelligence agencies.
Are these disheveled hackers who happen to be wearing military uniforms? Who are they?
I think that there's people in military uniforms, there's people that are probably more business focused, and then there's going to be a technical cadre that may be a little bit more informal and maybe a little bit more casual.
Experts say Putin likely has plausible deniability that Russian hackers outside the government could be targeting the West with the tacit approval and support of the Kremlin. How sophisticated are they?
When it comes to espionage and offense, they are fantastic. They are close to the best in the world, probably right after our own here in the United States.
Tonight, analysts are focusing on the next targets of Putin's hackers. One cyber expert who investigated the Russian government hacks told me the upcoming elections in Germany and Britain could be targeted, and the U.S. congressional committees investigating Russia's influence in last year's election, they should be guarding against hacks as well. Watch these congressional committees, Wolf. They could run into some problems that emanate from the Kremlin.
And today, Brian, Putin also spoke about his relationship with President Trump. What did he say?
He did, Wolf, basically saying for the moment at least he is not Donald Trump's friend. Putin said, quote, "How can I be friends with someone I've never met? I think Mr. Trump can't call me a friend either. We don't know each other," end quote. He said the political battle in the U.S. is raging and preventing the buildup of their relationship. Of course, Wolf, as you know, that political battle, Putin had a large role in creating that.
Certainly did. All right, Brian Todd reporting for us. Thank you. Coming up, President Trump announces that starting today, he's pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, in which nearly 200 nations have pledged to fight global warming. But there's growing opposition to the move at home and around the world.